Hi, welcome to How to Be Happy with NLP, Neuro Linguistic Programming. I am your host, and my name is Lindley Craig. I am an NLP trainer and NLP coach, as well as a heart math trainer and coach. I'm here to guide you on this exploration of how you can use Neuro Linguistic Programming tips to help you be happier, or just to be happy in some people's case. And so let's get started with kind of an overview of what we're going to learn in this session. First up, we're going to start with, why are we learning about being happy? Well, I know that kind of sounds obvious. I'm just going to give it an explanation that maybe you haven't heard before. And then we're also going to discover what stops us from being happy as we explore how can we use our specific tools of neuro-linguistic programming to help us out. And then I'm going to kind of ask you about, what did you notice? So in NLP, we like to have a reflection point, an understanding of what we've learned and how we might apply it in the future. So look at that at the very end of the program. I'd like to start with a question. What makes you smile? We know in neuro-linguistic programming that our physiology has a lot to do with our internal state, our internal representation of our world. So we have an understanding of what we're going through, an understanding of what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and that often comes out in our physiology. We also know that it works the other way around. Just by changing our physiology, we can signal our insides to start changing how they feel and what we're thinking about. So for me, to answer this question, the thing that makes me smile is this little guy. And this little guy's name is Nice. And Nice and I travel all over the world. Well, sometimes. And Nice and I travel all over the world. And Nice comes along with me just because every time I look at Nice, I smile. So Nice is in the back of a seat pocket in an airplane, or Nice is on this particular picture sitting on a bag that he travels around on my motorcycle. And Nice goes with me all over the place. And what the cool thing is that every time that I'm not feeling right, or I'm upset about something or what have you, all I have to do is get this little character out and I instantaneously smile. It changes everything for me. Now, I know that kind of sounds really silly. I just also know there's a lot of people carrying around their own little personal gnomes all around the world these days. Whether they be little sheep like this ones, or bears, or dogs, or other little stuffed animals. And we're all grown adults, and I guess maybe perhaps it's also a kindred spirit like we had when we were a child. You know, somebody that was always our best friend, that would always be there for us. And hell, if we have to do this as adults too, that'd be fine by me. So this is my thing that makes me smile. What's yours? Now, I have a happiness survey on my website, and it gives us an understanding of overall the number of people who have filled out the survey and how many of them are at what stage of happiness. And typically what I find is there are a lot of people in the lower stages of happiness. When we look at it, in the last group that I did, there was a 69.7 average out of 100 points. 69.7. So if you think about that, if they were going to school, that would sort of kind of slightly get them just barely a C, an average rating. And if you think about the people who were sort of at the top end of the list only scored, sort of an A minus or a B plus, sort of an 80, 86 or 87 percentile. And that kind of says a lot about why it's so important that we have as many happiness tools as we possibly can have, because most people aren't practicing the kind of tools that we need to practice. Let's take a look and see where you're spending a lot of your time. Now, over the past 2 weeks, I want you to take a thought process about where you've spent a lot of your time. Now, on this particular little, it's kind of like a graph, but not really. What we're doing is we're looking at where we spent our times based on our energy levels and our hormonal levels, as well as what's kind of going on for us from a heart rate perspective. And what I mean by this is we have two systems that are operating sort of simultaneously and automatically in our bodies. They're called the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is the system inside of ours, which is part of the autonomic nervous system, that gets us up and gets us going. It is sort of the high energy part, and it helps us to do all sorts of things like get ready for challenges and also get us ready for sports activity or things like that. So all sorts of movement and other things that we do are this sympathetic nervous system in command of our bodies when that happens. And then we have also our parasympathetic nervous system, and it's happening all as well at the same time. And our parasympathetic nervous system is our calming system. It's sort of the lower energy states. It's the calming place. It's the place that's more of the brake that we have in our system. So our sympathetic nervous system is more like our accelerator pedal, and our parasympathetic system is more like our brake. Now, on the right and left, so on our orange and red boxes here, we're talking about things that are depleting our energy levels, where it's a hormonal system that's working inside of us like cortisol or adrenaline. And so those are our red and orange boxes. And then our purple and green boxes are more of those DHEA kind of things. These are our renewing things that are going inside of us, our renewing emotions, our renewing thoughts. And those drive our hormones on that side of us to be beneficial, to renew us in ways. Now, I want you to think about this. So let's start in the upper right hand, so I guess you're looking at it the same way I am. So it'll be your upper left-hand corner, your red box. And in the red box is everything you've done in the past 2 weeks that are these high energy, but stress-driven or cortisol-driven types of activities. And when I want you to think about what you have been doing this past couple of weeks that might fit into this box. Specific activities might be something like having an argument with somebody, or something high stress like there might have been an announcement like the entire country is shutting down and you might have to go shopping really quickly, or any kinds of things that you're worried overly, or you're angry overly, and it's raising your heart rate and getting you sort of that accelerator pedal going, but in a more negative cortisol stress driven way. So take a couple of seconds now, or minutes if you'd like, to pause the video and think about those activities. And once you think about those activities, also think about what are the emotions that you have in this box. Are they things like anger or high frustration or annoyance? Things that are accelerator pedal kind of stress oriented, so high energy levels, but negative. Think about those things that also go in that box from an emotional perspective. Go ahead and pause the video now and we'll continue on. All right, the next box we're going to look at is the lower left-hand box, the orange box. And when you're looking at this box, this is going to be still on that stress-related side, that cortisol-producing side. Now we're talking more about that parasympathetic nervous system, though. We're thinking more along the lines of things like something that you might have been brooding about, something you might have regret about, something that you might have remorse about, things that are upsetting you, but they're not from a high stress level. There may be an underlying worry, a concern, or something about the future, maybe even the present or of the past. And so these are things that are more of, they're bringing you down, things that might cause depression, things that might cause low-level grades of anxiety, or just generalized worrying. These things, these kinds of emotions are all these lower parasympathetic driven, but also cortisol driven kinds of experiences. So think about it from your perspective. In the last 2 weeks, what might have happened in your world that would have fit into this box? And what emotions were you experiencing at that time when those events were going on? So go ahead and take a couple of minutes now, fill in that orange box there, and then we'll continue on. All right, let's move on to the purple box. The purple box is our high energy and renewing kinds of feelings. So these are things that drive our sort of happy hormones, things like DHEA or dopamine or serotonin. And we want to think about what activities have you done in the past couple of weeks, things that have happened to you that would put you into this place. So high sympathetic nervous system accelerator pedal kinds of activities. So these things things that you've gotten really excited about, activities that have brought you great joy or great passion that you get super involved in and really, really get you going. Those kinds of activities. It might have been a sporting event, or it might have just been walking out or hiking. There's something that you really got really involved in, and that your heart was beating really fast, but it was a good thing. You might have been really laughing hard about a movie or something your friends had said in a comment. Anything like this, a social gathering, or just with family around a table. Any kinds of things like this. So in the past couple of weeks, what would have those been? Those kind of activities, and what emotions were you feeling during that time? I'll give you a couple minutes now, so you can just pause the video and take some time of exploring those activities that you've done in the past couple of weeks and what emotions you had for that purple box. So high accelerator pedal and renewing kinds of positive emotions. And last but not least, we're in the bottom right-hand corner, this green box. Our green box is all about, again, the DHEA-driven hormonal base, sort of the more dopamine, serotonin kind of thing, but more on a calming state, a more parasympathetic driven. So much more relaxed and calm. What activities in the past couple of weeks have you done that put you in this place? It might just have been reading a really good book, or it might have been stretching after a good workout. It might have been talking just casually with a friend. Any kind of thing that puts you into that calming state where, everything's good. It might be a sense of contentment, or just a sense of abundance or gratitude. Any kind of thing that happened in the past couple of weeks, and write down the activity as well as the emotion you experienced with that activity. So go ahead and do that now, and I'll give you a couple of minutes, and you can pause the video and come back. Now, if you look at all of your overall boxes here, your red, orange, purple, and green, which box did you find it easiest to fill in as far as the activities and the emotions that you experienced on the last couple of weeks? And which boxes did you have a harder time filling in? And then when you look at it, if this were like a grid, where could you put yourself as an average of the average point of the past 2 weeks? Where might you place yourself as far as where you were? Was it sort of midway between orange and red and a little bit closer to the center line? Or was it high purple? Or was it sort of lower green but closer to the orange side of green? Where might it have been that you could put yourself that you would understand kind of what your average was for the last 2 weeks? And this concept I'm trying to get across here is that first we have to be aware of what really is going on in our life and where we spend the most amount of time. From a neurological perspective, as far as our nervous system goes, our parasympathetic and our sympathetic nervous system goes, as well as from our emotional state. And what sort of hormonal state are we driving in our bodies because of these either renewing or depleting states that we happen to be in? This has a lot to do with our happiness level and how much we determine that we believe that we are happy. Now, some of you might be saying that a lot of the activities that put you into the red or the orange weren't about something that you specifically had done. They were about other people. And that's fine. I just want to make sure that you kind of understand where we're coming from an NLP perspective side, as well as what doesn't help us to maintain our happiness. So let's take a look at some of the things that rob us from happiness and what we can do about it from a Neuro Linguistic Programming perspective. Now, the first one what we have here is blaming. So when we blame the economy or the government or our boss or our spouse, the medication we take or our children, the school or their teachers, for our unhappiness or for whatever events have gone on in our lives, this is what we call the blame frame. So what we're doing is we're adapting our mindset to blame others for what's happening outside of us, things that we might not think are in our control. What happens is that when bad stuff happens, something confusing or challenging happens, then the meaning that we create for this, the frame that we put around it, is this thing called blame. And we look for who is it that we can blame for what's going on outside of us. Now, there are two problems with the blame frame. First, that it's focused on the past and not our present or our future. If we're pointing fingers, then whatever it is already has happened. The second problem is that when we blame the external world for the problems or challenges in our lives, then we relinquish our responsibility. We give it up to the outside world. This isn't a really great way of creating happiness, is it? So what kind of habit do we need to create instead of doing this? The first thing that we need to do is take responsibility. That means your ability to choose how you respond to any situation. We all have the ability to choose. And we also have the ability to create different meanings from any given situation. And because we are here listening to this NLP session, we also have the knowledge and skills to be able to take responsibility. Once we can do this, then and only then can we practice the first happiness habit. Discipline optimism means to focus on your outcomes while having a clear understanding of the facts of your current reality. It's the discipline of taking stock of the challenges you're facing, knowing that you'll find a way to prevail. If you think that if someone else's fault or someone else's problem, then you aren't going to take responsibility, are you? And if you point the finger at the negativity in the outside world, then you're heading down the wrong path. If you sit down and be honest with yourself and about what the difficulties you might face while maintaining a positive mindset on the outcome, then the creativity needed on how to overcome any obstacle begins to flow. If you do this, then you're practicing disciplined optimism. Most people just blame others if they fail or when things go wrong. So to use this happiness habit, we must use NLP skills. Let's look at what skill we need. Our NLP skill is the outcome frame. When we use this frame, we are cultivating disciplined optimism. Blaming uses a blame frame, and we want to use the NLP outcome frame instead. We constantly want to ask ourselves, what is it that we're trying to achieve, and how do we get there? Let me give you an example to illustrate. I was in a restaurant with a group of people, and there was a waiter who was pouring warm water into the glasses of a couple of the participants in my group. And there was another waiter who was behind him, who was coming through the restaurant with food in his hands. And he was sort of adjusting where he was walking because somebody else was walking around the same area. And when he did so, he accidentally bumped the elbow of the guy who was pouring the water. Now, of course, the water spilled over the table as well as on my participant as well. And so the waiter, of course, was quite shocked about this because he didn't do it purposely, and it obviously wasn't his fault. And what happened next was quite interesting because instead of the waiter who spilled the water, instead of him worrying about cleaning up the water or cleaning up the guest who had water spilled on him, he was more concerned with going over to blame the person who bumped into him. And this is exactly what I mean by using a blame frame instead of an outcome frame. Now, had he come back over to our table and just wiped up the water and got a fresh glass of warm water for the person and made sure the person was taken care of, then we would have felt sort of quite special about that interaction. And instead, what we all noticed was he was running the wrong frame and was so interested in who was to blame for the problem that he wasn't really thinking about what outcome he wanted, let alone what his customer wanted. And so this is what I mean by focusing on the outcome frame. We want to use disciplined optimism and use our creativity to solve challenges and problems in our lives. And we're going to let go of the past and instead look at our present challenges and our future desires in a positive way, which requires us to think differently. Now, I want you to take an example where you've blamed someone about something and now replay that whole thing in your mind. What outcome did you want instead? What could you have done differently in that situation that would have allowed you to focus on the outcome? And what will you do differently in the future when a time like this one from the past comes again, now that you know how to use this outcome frame? Take a couple of minutes now and go ahead and fill out your worksheet. And it will help you along with those questions. And when you're done, just restart your video. Our second happiness robber is complaining. It's another form of blaming when we blame the external world instead of being focused on the past, it's focused on the present. This is the form of feeling sorry for yourself and playing the victim in life. It allows you to draw sympathy and empathy from others, which gets you connection and unfortunately does not get you happiness. So we have a saying about energy flows where our attention goes. So if your attention is on what is wrong, then you will have energy and attention flowing to other things that are wrong. What can you do instead? Focus on what is right. Focus on what is good. Focus on what you want. Like in the previous NLP skill set, the outcome frame. This isn't an NLP skill, and still, it's useful to overcome complaining. That is, being grateful. In the book, The Blue Zones, waking up each day grateful for whatever comes your way is part of the concept. Centenarians were thankful for their gardens, their family, their friends, and each and every day they saw the sun rise and sunset. They were fully and truly at peace and had spent most of their days like this. Our happiness habit number 2, grateful foresight. It's like disciplined optimism, except it requires you to go one step further. Not only do you need to take stock of your current predicament and be optimistic about the future, now you need to be grateful about your predicament. Let me have someone else explain it.
The toughest one is the present, isn't it? You're fired. Handle it right that moment, how about? Right? So I'm going to give you an example of how I handled it in the present. How many of you are familiar with Viktor Frankl? If you are not, please read Man's Search for Meaning. I read the book twice. I read the book every 2 years. It's a hard book to read. Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychotherapist dealing with what he called logotherapy, which was meaning-based therapy. He basically believed that if you could have somebody assess the correct meaning for an event, they could clean anything up. And he had finished his book and he had his manuscript on his hand, and then he found himself on a train to Auschwitz. And his life as he knew it was over. And in that moment, he thought, you know what? I have an opportunity here. I have an opportunity to prove my life's work by going to the concentration camps. And his book is fascinating. It's difficult to read. So the way I read it, by the way, this is my formula. If you want to read it the way I read it, you get it as an audiobook and you go to Whistler, BC, although any ski hill will work. You read the book as an audiobook on the chairlift going up. And then you listen to Led Zeppelin going down. It works very nicely. Now, I've been working on this book, The Hindsight Window, and one day my wife and I arrived home. We've been on the road for 6 months. 6 months we had not been home. We had everything we owned pretty much of value with us, all the computers. I had just been in the bush with the Hadza Bushmen for a week with all original footage that was not yet on the cloud. I had all original photography from some time that I spent with wild chimpanzees in Mahale. We had $45,000 worth of stuff with us. Now, the reason I know that is because as soon as we arrived home, somebody stole all of it. Passports, money, cameras, everything, gone. We went in shopping. We left the driver to take care of the car, and instead of taking care of the car, he texted his friends and he told them to come and clear out the car. 6 months on the road giving, 6 months on the road working with people, 6 months on the road of creating all kinds of miracles around the world, and this is our repayment? That's how I'm feeling, right? And so here's what's going on. I open the back of the truck, this stuff's gone. I am heartbroken. It's gone. First, there's denial. Oh, he moved it. He must have moved the stuff. Then there's reality. He didn't move it. Now, we've heard a few people today talk about changing your eyes to change your stress levels. One of the first things you do when you become afraid is you look intently at stuff and focus. If you are afraid of public speaking, sometimes it's because you're focusing rather than having a cast out view of the entire audience. When you open your eyes into a relaxed state, you become more relaxed. In that moment, it's difficult to do that because this stuff's missing and you're looking for clues. And I'm angry, and I'm frustrated, and I'm pissed off. It's all gone. And my wife, crying her eyes out. That pissed me off. Now I'm angry. But is anger going to help? No. Anger's not going to help at all. The next 2 weeks of our life are ruined. I'm angry. I've got adrenaline coursing through my system. She's crying. And I have to ask myself, is anger helping? And I realized it isn't. And I thought to myself, okay, but what would help? And I said calm. But calm was not available to me. It was not an available emotion in the App Store. Couldn't get it. And so I started asking a new question. I suddenly realized the Viktor Frankl thing. If he's on a train with his book about meaning and he's on his way to Auschwitz and he can reconcile with that, surely I can reconcile with this. And so I started thinking to myself, all right, I have actually zero regret. I have no regrets, no anger, no resentments about my past, none. And I had a tough childhood. I had to call the police once to break up a fight between my mom and my dad over a knife. I had a tough childhood. I'm grateful for it. I was homeless at 15 years old in Edmonton, Alberta, in the winter. I would like to tell you that means minus 40. And for those of you who are Americans, it's the same. Minus 40 is minus 40 in both. It's cold. But I don't have any anger or resentment about that. So I looked at this event and I thought, well, you know what? I know that one day I'm going to feel grateful for this. One day I am. Why might I? Why might I one day be grateful for this event? Why might I? And I started thinking, okay, well, can't come up with anything. No, come on, why might you be grateful for this one day? Well, to be fair, you and Elise could use 2 weeks without work distraction, what have you. So without laptops, you're gonna have 2 weeks of nothing. So you're gonna have a lot of time together. I thought, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And also, my phone was gone, and I'd been thinking about living without a phone, which, by the way, as a result of this, I ended up living without a cell phone for 6.5 months, wrote an 80,000-word book, and had the single most productive 6 months of my life. That's a whole nother talk for another day. 6.5 months without a phone, and the only reason I bought one is my wife got pregnant. Then I had to have a phone. Fair enough? So I started thinking, okay, then I'm gonna try my no phone experiment. I don't have a laptop. Plus, I told my wife when I sold my last business that we're gonna take her on this huge shopping spree. I told her $15,000 of anything you want. Clothes, all of it, just whatever you want. She hates shopping for clothes. We've never done it. Now she has no choice. Plus, she has a 3.5-year-old Mac, and I'm her IT director, which means I'm the one fixing everything all the time. And she won't let me buy her a new Mac. Now, I get to buy her a new Mac. Hey, while I'm at it, I get to buy myself a new Mac. I am not kidding you. I'm still standing there with the door open, looking at the empty truck, and I started feeling good about this theft. And I had a longer list. I kept coming up with reasons that this theft was a massive gift in my life. And I'm like, this is incredible. And I turn around, I put my hand on my wife's shoulders. And men, by the way, if you would like to know what women really want to know from you, what they really want to know above all is that everything is going to be okay. And so I turned and I put my hands on her shoulders and I looked her deep in the eyes and I said, listen, I'm telling you, everything is going to be okay. And she looks at me and she goes, how? And I said, this is going to be hard for you to understand at this moment because you have all the adrenaline in your system, but I'm telling you, look at me right now. Do I look angry? She goes, no. Do I look upset? No. I'm excited. She goes, you're excited? Why? And I go, laptops, this, that, plus you and I are going to have 2 weeks with no electronic distractions. We're going to have a ton of fun. We're going to have great sex, walks on the beach. It's going to be the best 2 weeks of our lives. She's like, cool. And I want to tell you something. It was. The next 2 weeks were fabulous. And it would put me in a position where, by the way, I was the one editing all the surveillance video for the police. I was directing the investigation because when you are rational, people listen to you. When you're all anger-based, they don't. So here's how it works. Event happens, you figure out the emotion you're having, and you decide, is it serving you? Then you say, what emotion would be serving me better? And then you ask yourself, what would have to happen for me to find gratitude right now? The more gratitude you can find for your past, the more faith you will have in your future. Thank you guys so very much. It's been an honor and a privilege to be here with you. Thank you.
So how do we find our own grateful foresight? With this NLP skill. An NLP skill, which is called reframing. This is when we're taking a situation that's negative and turning it into a positive one, or at least a neutral one. And we can do this by asking ourselves questions. How is this funny? How can I use this to help me? What is the lesson I'm meant to learn here? Any kind of question, just like the gentleman in the video was talking about. How might I see this as a gift in my life? How might I be grateful for this? How might I? And all you need to do is step into that moment for a second and be able, just like he did, to be able to say, how might I be grateful for this in the future? That's the gratitude and the grateful foresight I'm talking about. Why might this be a good thing for you? Now, why don't you take 2 minutes now and answer the questions on your worksheet about grateful foresight. What is an example of the time you've complained about something recently? And then imagine being grateful for whatever situation it was instead of complaining about it. What could you have been grateful for? How could the situation been funny or good or useful to you? Now, also, how can you remember to use grateful foresight in the future? So go ahead and fill out the worksheet now and come back to us when you're done. All right. Our last happiness robber, number 3, which is shaming. Shaming is when we turn our blame inward. We shame ourselves for our past mistakes or failures, or we replay past situations in our head over and over. Maybe sometime when someone else teased us or spoke harshly to us. Maybe it was a time when somebody lied or shouted at us. They might have called us names, given us a bad review, or broke our hearts. Shaming is when we blame ourselves and what we did, and we relive these past episodes over and over again. Here's the problem with it. Our brains have an emotional memory, and each time we relive that drama of these past events, we dilute that memory. And we can actually recreate it to be even worse than it ever was. I have somebody I know whose mother called them a name when they were a child. And each time that she remembers her mother calling her that specific name, she makes that memory change. She distorts the memory. She deletes parts of the memory. And she generalizes the memory even more. And this is what I'm talking about. Our brain doesn't have the capacity, the capability to remember everything exactly how it happened each and every time we go back to it. I also had a depression client who did something that she could not forgive herself for. And she slipped into this massively deep depression. She suffered from this depression for over 10 years. And it was this one event, this one thing that she had done that she could not accept. And even though she had been to many specialists, many kinds of people to try to understand it logically, to understand her decision and what she did and how it was the right decision for her in that moment in time, no matter how many people coached her or counseled her or psychoanalyzed her about this depression, she had that depression for over 10 years. The reason is because she hadn't gotten rid of this shame that went along with the depression. I worked with her with NLP tools for 6 sessions, and we were able to get her to get past the shame. And this is an amazing thing. Our happiness habit number 3, joy. Now, this is probably not exactly the way you're supposed to spell it, and that's okay. What it is all about is being able to take what's going on in our mind and change it. Now, this is an NLP skill that we're going to use to counter shaming. Actually, in NLP, it's called cancel and erase. And it takes awareness and discipline. When I first learned this, I realized that in my mind, I was dying every single day. When I would get into a taxi, I would imagine the taxi getting in an accident and me ending up in the hospital fighting for my life. If I got in a bus, the bus would roll over or roll off the side of the road. And again, I would either die or be struggling for my life in the hospital. When I got onto the train, well, there was already a video explaining how the train was going to have an explosion by terrorists. So I didn't even have to visualize it. The video was already playing. And so even when I went on my motorcycle, I would imagine cars hitting me or me falling off my bike for any reason whatsoever. And I realized that once I started being aware of my thoughts, I realized how many times that I did this. And so when I learned this concept of joy, I started changing how I went about my thought process during the day. And the first day that I started using this and sort of canceling and erasing this thought process of this negativity of me dying every day, I realized that I was doing it about 150 times a day. That's how many times that I had to choy myself or cancel or erase myself out of it. Now, the choy apparently comes from this Cantonese expression. And I learned it because I was in a taxi with somebody here in Singapore. And I got into the taxi and I told the person to put on their seatbelt in case we get into a car accident. And he and the driver simultaneously says choy. And I didn't quite understand what they were talking about, so I inquired. And they explained to me that when you say choy, it's like you're erasing the thing that was just said. So me telling the person next to me that he needs to put on his safety belt because I don't want to get into a car accident, I'm actually putting the car accident there in their future. And it's true, that's also the way it works in NLP. So it's great how the Cantonese are already kind of into this. So it's like an internal representation. We have to first see the car getting in an accident. We have to feel the fact that there might be something to worry about before the words come out of our mouth to say, put on your seatbelt in case we get into an accident. So this choy thing is like the cancel erase. It takes that thing away. And it's not just important that you bring awareness to it and cancel and erase it. What we need to also do is find what else we want instead. Now, this is the crucial part and what makes the difference from an NLP perspective. So unfortunately, the Cantonese don't do this part. It's the part that allows us to be able to go, hey, what do we want to have happen now instead of what we just said? So for me, instead of dying every day, it's arriving safely home on my motorcycle. It's going on the bus and enjoying the view from the top deck of the double-decker bus. When I'm in a taxi, it's what do I want instead? Well, I want a nice, safe journey where I can have a chat with the driver and understand him and his family and what he does outside of driving a taxi. So it's all of these things that what do we want instead? And that refocuses our attention. Now, I said it before, our energy goes where our attention flows. So we want to keep our attention going in the right direction. Now, I've said choy so many times to my family, even my family that lives in the United States says choy when somebody says something negative about the future. Now, there's an exercise for you in your handout about choy. So what is an example of something that you feel guilty about or shameful about? And then what do you want instead? And how can you remember to use choy or cancel or erase? And the question, what do you want instead in the future? Go ahead and fill in the answers to those questions on your worksheet now. And here's my challenge to you before we go. What is the one skill that you will use to create your happiness habit? Each one of these skills, disciplined optimism, grateful foresight, or choy, is designed to help you to create more happiness in your life. Disciplined outcome allows us to use an outcome frame, an outcome of something that makes us happy, an outcome that brings us joy, an outcome that keeps us on that DHEA side of in our purple and green boxes, right? An outcome that creates more serotonin and more dopamine in our systems. And by having a habit like that, then we have more happiness. Grateful foresight is another option you can choose, where we're going to be using reframing to be able to take a situation and, just like the gentleman in the video, find out what is it, what might we be grateful for, what might we be happy for, what might be positive or beneficial about what's going on. And it's our ability to reframe negative situations like that that brings us this extra element of happiness in our lives. And then this concept of joy, or cancel and erase. And what do we want instead? Again, focusing ourselves on the attention and the energy flow towards that positive side of our chart, of our purple and green boxes. That's what all of these exercises do. And the intent of this is for you to be able to create this, because happiness isn't something that you have. In NLP, we call it a nominalization. Happiness isn't something you have, it's something that you do. It's about focusing on being happy. It's a state of being. It is an action. It's something that you are doing rather than having. And by doing these things, disciplined optimism, by focusing on your outcome, grateful foresight, by focusing on reframing, and using joy or cancel erase, and what do you want instead, all help you to create that side, that purple-green side of our thing, and create us into being happy rather than having something that you can't possibly own. Now, I hope this helps you to adjust where your current level is. And you might want to come back to that chart of the red and orange and purple and green in the next couple of weeks, and determine how your new average and how you can shift yourself over to that purple and green side even more and more each week, just by doing these particular skill sets. Now, I hope you enjoyed this particular session with us, and we will see you in the next one, NLP skills that you choose for yourself to learn and grow and develop. I look forward to seeing you sometime in the future, hopefully in person, and get to know you and your growth and your development and the journey that you are on. Until then, signing off now, and we will see you then.